name changes, date of birth, mistypes, anything like that. If you've updated it in Powerschool, don't forget to go and update it in the ID system as well, because that is where that information publishes from. And kind of here's like a little diagram of what you would see. So in other words, if you typed Robert in the person ID system, that's what's going to publish. So even though you might have Bobby with the wrong date here, or maybe that's the right date in Powerschool, you're going to see what's in the unique ID system publish. Okay. Crisis event. Okay, so that's a code that's unique to identify a crisis, and NDE did come out, and I think they brought that up in the presentation because I just stole their slide. So I need to, so ND is asking districts to activate their crisis event indicator for 2021, and I'll show you where that's at in Powerschool. And you're only reporting students who are quarantined due to COVID or exposure that chose remote learning. The school is on an alternate schedule, or other students specific to school situations. All right. And so once, kind of like a lot of things, once you set this, you don't need to change it throughout the year. So if a student should get quarantined more than once, NDE just needs to know that they were quarantined at some point in time during the year, not how many times. And so where that's at when you are in your Powerschool is if you go on state, province, NE, under crisis events, here's where you can put that start and end date. And even though NDE doesn't actually collect a start and end date, that might be something that's beneficial to you as a district in order to run some reports or get or export that data out. So you'll want to put a start and end date, and then you'll want to put that event COVID-19. I'm going to go back a slide.
What about the displaced there on that?
Okay, so displaced is if indeed, so this would be where this was actually used is if for some reason, like at the flood situation where they were displaced and not able to stay in their home. So in probably most of our quarantine situations, that's not going to be, we don't need to check that. I'll double check with Max, make sure I've got that right. So again, the guidance that we're getting, I'm backing up here, you are quarantined or you've had or you're dealing with COVID. You as a student have chosen remote, or the family has chosen remote learning. School is on an alternate schedule. So I guess if you do as a district do alternate schedule because of COVID, then everybody would in your district would get this particular flag. Last year, this ended up being somewhat optional simply because of the fact that all the schools shut down. So everybody would have had this flag last year. And if you have any questions about whether to mark this, NDE is probably the first place you need to go and ask those questions. You could also look at that Launch NE as well. That's a good resource. All right, some new data elements that came through and where those can be found are, we have those different calendar events. So instructional day now means that 01, which we've used for many, many years, is that you are physically in the building, fully in learning, butts in seats. Then you have split school. So includes where some schools are in school and other schools, other students are in remote learning. Okay. And then you have where you went all remote. And if you look here, here's where, your calendar membership site types is something that you would set up in your district office. So if you're part of Nebraska Powerschool, we've already gone in and done that for you. If you're not part of a consortium, you may need to either reach out to Powerschool, or if you're part of ESU 10, reach out to them, and you would need to add those particular calendar events to your district. And then you'll need to make sure that they get mapped in those code set mappings. And then where you would actually use those is in your calendar. And I didn't make a screenshot of that, but in your calendar, and it would be either an in-session day, in school, in-session day, remote learning, or in-session day, split school. Okay, so again, part of Nebraska Power School, we've done this for you. If you are not part of a consortium, um, you can reach out to Powerschool or even NDE, and I do help districts from time to time as much as I can. If you're part of ESU 10, reach out to them to get this set up. Any questions about getting this set up? Natalie did a great job, or Naomi did a great job of talking through that digital equity. So my job right now is really just to show you where that's at in Powerschool. So they've talked through, the elements that are required, and they're really just pushing districts. If you can get this data in by November 15th, this could make you eligible for some possible funding, and making sure we're getting those students who are in rural areas or areas where they can't get to that technical uh, stuff, that technical support, that we can change that. So this is actually a new menu item in Powerschool. And you do have to have, I think it's 8.2 or greater before you'd see this menu. So if I have anybody on who doesn't see this menu, so when you click on a student, so you're at a student level and you click on learning preferences, so it's under enrollment, that is where this particular screen will pop up, and it runs much like a program screen. So you click on new, and then this program or this window would pop up, and then you would put in your information. We are working with Powerschool to see if they could default. Like right now, you would have to physically put in a learning preference. We're working with them to see if they can update that at all.
Amy, a quick question about that.
Mhm.
Do you know if there's going to be an ability to upload via file into those fields?
Like an like a FTP?
Like if I had a CSV file that I wanted to upload for 1,000
I mean,
students.
you can always import and export, yes.
Okay, all right,
So,
thank you.
and again, here's where there is somebody at your school who's attending all these webinars. There is about 5 different websites where they're already putting templates of surveys that your districts need to ask. Philip's question is, if I need to import this data, is that possible? The short answer is yes. And if that's something that you might need assistance with, again, if you're part of Nebraska Power School, we have put that information together, and so we can help you with that. If you're not part of a consortium, I would reach out to Powerschool themselves, and they can help you figure out what fields need to be imported and how you would go about doing that. Again, if you're part of ESU 10, they would be able to help you with that. Any questions about the student learning preferences? Do I have anybody online who doesn't see this menu item when they click on a student? Okay. I'm taking the silence. Okay, so some other things that are changed. We talked about this. If you're part of SRS and you do not use Powerschool to publish your SPED, then you can kind of take a little nap for the next minute or so. But if you are using Powerschool to publish your SPED, then just we're talking through those no's. So 10 public school is no longer a valid code. Okay, you cannot use 10 anymore. Elements that are no longer collected for advisor, although those might be elements that we want to keep just for other reasons, will be that special education hours per week along with school hours per week. What's been added is this 20, 21, and 22, which gives you your percentage ranges. And so if we look at the program screen that's in Powerschool, even though 10 is there, if you try to choose 10, it will simply give you an error and will not publish at all. So you cannot use 10, right? And this is no longer valid data that's being published. Now, this might be data, however, that you still want to collect and put in there. And so we would encourage you to do so, but it will not be published. And then this highlighted green is what you need to change all those to. So for most of you smaller districts, this is literally going in and touching each student and making sure that you've updated that correctly. And then also don't forget that if you've got those birth to 3 that have changed to the big kiddos, so from part C to part B, that you're getting those updated as well. All right, just a few other changes. That career and technical education, the publishing of that has been removed so that we no longer have to publish that information. That information is getting derived by NDE based on course codes. So please make sure that you're working with your counselors or whoever is part of your career education staff, teachers, and make sure you're using those right course codes. There are Appendix Ds that are specific to the CTE course codes. The 504, this is nothing new you need to do, but how it publishes has changed. So the 504 has moved from a program to a student characteristics. So you'll now see that in the student demographics record or portion of the student data that goes up. Again, you have no need to change how you're entering that information. Naomi talked about the student program. So students who are not eligible for free and reduced lunch, so have that P status, a food service program record will no longer publish for them. Schools that participate in that community eligibility provision can choose not to submit any food service program records as well. Basically, if you do submit them, NDE will simply just ignore them because they know who that is. So the only thing that's going to get published for students is free and reduced. Now we are seeing some wonky things. That's a technical term, wonky. With some of these lunch programs, we do have a meeting with Powerschool at 11 today. So in the next 10 minutes. So that is something we're going to kind of talk through. We've been looking into the issue for probably the past couple of weeks. And simply put, we're seeing students who, for some reason, their data simply just isn't publishing, even though it appears on the user interface that it is entered correctly. So please double check your lunch records. And if something does not look right, and specifically if you are a Powerschool district, please open up a ticket with Powerschool or your consortium so we know. The more that feedback we can get on what's going on, and sometimes that puts a little bit more pressure on Powerschool. So double check that lunch. Early childhood program, there's simply just a name change in how things are going up. So something, again, on the back end that you wouldn't necessarily see. Some elements that are now required for state reporting, but things that Powerschool was already capturing and publishing are that student address, street number, et cetera. So those are things that get published as part of the student demographics. As I stated in the second bullet, Powerschool has already been reporting that data. And it's used specifically for special education post-outcome reports. So again, nothing new on your part, just a simple update. A quick reminder of what those fall submissions are. You've got your student demographics, your student school enrollment, okay, and make sure you're including those summer transfers appropriately, whether you put them in the previous school year or you put them in at the beginning of this school year, your SPED records, and then the 3 programs such as early childhood food program and English language learners. Don't forget about your follow-up window, 1920. In the past, we kind of try to dive into this first because that seemed to kind of make sense. Let's fix the past before we kind of tackle the future. But I think a lot of you will agree. Sometimes what you need to do is you need to publish your 2021 data because that's sometimes what's going to tell you what's wrong with the past. So what I would do right now is I would focus on your 2021 data, publish everything, and then as you start to feel comfortable where you're at with that, then go back and look at your 1920 data. Do your best to fix all those errors, et cetera. But there is just a limited, there are limited items or data that will get copied back over. Note that one of those items that does not get copied back over into locked data is attendance. We have gotten some emails about auditors and attendance being off. If you're part of our consortium or even part of ESU 10 consortiums, we will do our best to figure out what went wrong. And we can help you explain that to the auditor. You can still change the information, but it's going to go into the live data. It will not go into locked data. They have already started pulling that locked data and using it for state aid. So if there is some things that are wrong, that's not going to change the state aid calculation as it sits now. You would have to go through another process in order to do that. So just be mindful of that the only items that you can change are the ones that you see listed. The only items that will get changed are what you see listed here. And then just remember, reach out to your help desks. If you're part of a consortium, I recommend that you start with them. And if they think you need to reach out to NDE or Powerschool directly, they will let you know. And then always reach out to the NDE help desk appropriately as well. Staff questions, and then Min's always available for SRS. Okay, I've got about 10 minutes before I need to jump off and get off to another meeting. Peggy from Nebraska Powerschool is going to be your Powerschool support person for today, but she has access to myself and a handful of other Powerschool folks. So if she gets stuck or needs some additional hands-on, she will grab somebody. Are there any questions, concerns? Something I didn't talk about?